It really is. It's great.
And we are live. Welcome to Spiritually Raw, everybody. I'm April. This is Jay, and we are with the absolutely beautiful Mary Buckingham. And we're super excited to talk about her favorite subject, of which she is an expert in, called, Mary refers it as the quantum library. Now, a lot of people, Mary, refer to it as the Akashic Records or the Mind of God, but you refer to it as the quantum library. And you started, we're going to talk about a series that you have on Gnostic, and it is phenomenal. For anyone that is wanting to know how to access the quantum library, how to tap into that higher level of consciousness, you have it all laid out in a six show series.
I would say
say
it's an incredible series, everybody. It's Quantum Library on Gnostic, and you're seeing there's a 50% coupon code right there. Mary Quantum. That's a cool name.
It is. I just want to kind of touch on some of the key topics that we've discussed over the course of the 6 series. You talk about how to access the quantum library. You talk about 0 point energy, unpacking all the clairs, how to strengthen your intuition. That is something that is so important that people need, especially in today's world. Strengthening the intuition, and really also being able to discern. You're teaching discernment as well. You talk about shadow people on the last 2 episodes, and also something that I thought was so fascinating, the correlation between brain trauma and the quantum library and the healing aspects of it. So for those of you that want to learn more on how to access it, please do check out all of her links. They're in the description below. So Mary, help us understand, what is the quantum library?
Yes. Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me. This is so exciting. The quantum library, a lot of people refer to it as the Akashic Records, but another term that resonates with me is the universal records. And as we tap into these higher dimensional aspects within ourselves, we begin to access universal consciousness. And universal consciousness, unity consciousness, the 0 point, these are all interrelated terms in different fields of thought that all are kind of referring to the same thing. And as you kind of already touched on, that we touched on in this series, it really starts with shadow work and clearing our trauma and clearing the things that block us. Because the things that block us, as I've seen when I'm doing sessions, are thought forms that create constructs. They create veils that block people's perception of seeing reality as it is. And we hear this a lot in this type of space, like, open your eyes so you can see reality for what it really is. And it's like, but the thing is there's billions of us, and we all have a subjective perceptive lens. We are all emanations of a creator source that came down to this polarized reality to realize to self-realize. So when we come here, some people have referred to it as experiencing the unexperienced. So if you have, if you're really connected to your inner knowing, your inner seeing, your inner hearing, your inner feeling, which are just other ways of saying the clairs, you will begin to see more and more into the illusion of this reality. So that's where when people are like, I want to be more psychic, I want to be more tuned in, I'm like, well, buckle up, because it's like, yes, it's amazing. And, you realize more of yourself, but it's not like you get a lottery ticket and you're just walking around. It's you definitely, love is truth. Truth is love. Light is information. And when we align with our highest truth, it can be uncomfortable because we're forced to clear things out of our life that no longer resonate. And that can often involve people that have been in our lives for a long time. And I know a lot of people really struggle with that.
It's definitely not an easy road, but once you cross over and you get to the other side, It is so worth it. It is so worth it. You see things from an entirely different perspective. It changes your your life on so many different levels. Literally shifts dimensions, and it's worth it.
So, when you're
Don't
thinking,
give up. It is so
no,
worth
don't
it.
give up. But for real,
Yeah.
don't. Well, you can't give up. I mean, well, you can, but don't. is that when you think of the quantum library, like it's so misunderstood. Like it seems almost so phantom to people. But your experiences as a real phenomenon. How often, like from our best practices, and I know we talk about this in the course, and everybody again. Happy holidays to you, whatever your faith is. But you see right here, there's a holiday promo, the Quantum Library. You're going to get 50% off on that. When you go to Gnostic TV and visit Mary on that, you'll save 50%. There's the coupon code on that. Check that out. But how often, from a self-discipline, is it an ongoing thing that someone should be visiting? And is it their quantum library unique, or is it the quantum library as a universal?
Yeah. So from the perspective of like dropping into a session with an individual, there's what some people commonly call the pathway prayer. I personally have experienced my own way of entering in the records. And because when it occurred for me, and I know we talk about this in this series, one day I woke up and I was receiving massive downloads of information. And you guys know Debbie Solaris. She's like really well-known galactic Akashic reader. She has a similar experience when she started to tap into the records. It was literally, and this was after her experience with the Arcturian. So she had a different sort of introduction into that space. Because when you go into those higher dimensional spaces, it changes your brain. It's similar to a near-death experience. And I think for me, my entryway was a Kundalini experience. And I know that can be the case for a lot of people. So it's where our dormant life force energy awakens and shoots up our spine and basically kind of like goes like this through our pineal gland. But we're definitely meant to live in this reality and be present on earth. When you go into meditations or sessions with clients, if you're just doing something interpersonally, it's a very intentional process of dropping into that quantum space, because when we are bringing in this energy, the way that I describe it, and I know others have as well for themselves who do channeling, it's receiving electrical input. And what I do is translate that electrical input that comes down, and I allow it to translate through my human self. And if we're bringing in a bunch of electric energy and we're not balancing it by grounding, by closing those receptor centers off, we can fry ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that with where we're moving as a human collective, everyone's talking about like the new earth and all the new energies coming in and the coronal mass ejections and we're stepping into 5D and all this stuff. It's like, it's going to be different for everybody in a sense. And there's also the bifurcation, the splitting of realities.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to these new energies flooding in, it's of the utmost importance for people to be very much connected to their intuition and into their inner self and to their own, what are my thoughts and what are not my thoughts.
So let's talk about the bifurcation for a second, because it's an interesting perspective. So is it, from your perspective, a splitting of two realities, or is it a splitting of multiple realities? And how exactly does this bifurcation work? And has it already happened? Are we literally living through it right now, or is it something that has not yet occurred?
Great question. Yeah. So the way that I have experienced it and then seen it also within other people's experience is, if you are, let's say, like if we're focused on one individual, let's say this individual had something occur in 2012, they experienced a radical awakening and they started seeing beyond just the surface level of everything in their life. And they started to make all these changes. All of a sudden, all the people in their periphery started to not resonate anymore because they tapped into a different frequency. And if you take your former self here and you rise up to a different frequency, the density here kind of ruffles up like dust, and it has to kind of fly and disperse because it's no longer able to be contained in the body unless it's contained through an organ or through thought forms that can stay stuck on loop if the person wants to stay, if they're making the decision to stay stuck, which can often be unconscious. But what happens is people then kind of start to look around and they're like talking to people that they've been around their whole life, or they're at their job that they've been at for 10, 15, 20 years. And they're like, oh my gosh, nothing's making sense. Am I in the Twilight Zone? Is this the Truman Show? Like, what is going on? That's an example of a split where someone went they up leveled, they took a quantum leap, and their surroundings no longer resonate. And what I also see is people, and this is part of really trusting your intuition, that mental body, which is kind of it's a lower self, which sounds negative, but it's not meant to be negatively connotated. But that lower aspect of self, or the ego, takes a faculty like the intuition, which operates on a different, time space continuum, and it questions it. It's because it's actually being forced by a higher power to dissolve, but it really, like I say this a lot, the wolves don't go out without a fight at the gates of heaven. Like, they will literally, I've seen people really struggle with mental health stuff over the years as well, as whether they're in an awakening or with healing, or they're just living their life. It doesn't have to necessarily be about like ascension or any of these things, but it's all that mental space, that which is why when people can really get the time with themselves to be still, to be quiet, even if it's 15 minutes a day, 20 minutes a day, you start to be able to recognize what your energy signature is outside of all of these other influences that are constantly inundating people day to day.
Do you think that the mental anguish that people feel when they're going through this, do you think it's as a result of maybe just a lot of like their timelines, if you would, rushing in right now? Do you think this is just a mass rush and they're like, what the hell? I mean, is it that possible?
That's a lot to deal with, Jay.
Yeah, totally. It's like when we kind of discussed this in the series for anyone watching, like, where if in this reality we have like the cards spread out like this, like if you were to imagine getting your cards read or whatever, and I don't do card reading, but I'm just using this as an example. We're looking at events, birth to where we are now, like we're laying them out on a cards on a table. And then to go to your question, we look at the stack of cards like this, and then we look from this higher perspective down. So like from the mind of God down, and everything's kind of happening simultaneously. That's how time shifts when we go to higher dimensions. And if somebody kind of has like a crack in the ceiling and there's like some light coming in, there's new energies coming in, there's frequencies coming into their nervous system, the things that are in the unconscious get illuminated. They get kind of forced to the surface. And what I do see as well quantumly is I see a lot of things in spheres. So this is an example of where a sphere will come up and it will be like a projection overlay. So for example, the sphere is coming up because somebody's thought forms are projecting and creating an overlay. And that overlay can create thought loops, triggers, the same type of person showing up day to day to like bug the person, whatever. And a lot of people, this is where it kind of separates the, this is the weirdest, boys from the men, girls from the women, whatever. Like
Well, whatever they identify as, right?
Yeah, whatever they identify as. Like
Right.
it's if you're in these patterns, a lot of people just kind of stay in it, and it's like they just boom, boom, boom. It's like a robot kind of walking into a wall, backing up, walking into a wall. That's probably one of the most common things I'll see with the human collective is, and that has to do with sovereignty. That has to do with like the victim mentality where people will be so addicted because of the neurotransmitters like norepinephrine, to pain receptors because they've had so much trauma from start to where they are now. And so then they'll kind of just be like, you know what? Oh, I'm the one who can make the change. And then they'll grapple with that because it's like, but I was so wronged. Like so many of these things happened to me and I'm so, messed up now. I have PTSD, I have complex PTSD, I have personality disorder, whatever it is. And this then goes back to the simple aspect of like, if we think about this perspective from reincarnation and how we came to this reality to evolve and expand as a soul, it can shift. If people can buy into that, which sounds funky, but it's kind of like, if you're willing enough to be free, to be sovereign, to be expanded, to be abundant, I think you'd be more than willing to just want to take responsibility. Like, okay, what can I do? What do I need to do to better my life, to be happier, to be more free, etc.
I want to talk a second about reincarnation, but if anybody has any questions, just put them in the chat and we'll get to them. I promise. Reincarnation. Do you believe that we planned our lives before we came here again on this earth plane? Do you believe we picked our family?
Yeah, I think that, and I keep referencing the series because I know we've talked about these things on there and we expand on this, but this analogy that I use is like the road of life and how we have set events, like primary main event markers, if you want to call it that. I know I've heard some people refer to it as that, that are preset, like because our soul is so advanced, the technology and the intelligence of it is so expanded and all seeing and all knowing in the other realm. So before we're incarnated, before we enter into this physical body, which is the limitation of the infinite aspect of us, there's a selection of people, places, things, events to occur in order to expand and evolve. And so if we're on the road of life, here's an event marker here, like, we're back here in 2000, whatever. And we kind of, we're going off track. Oh, we're out of the frame. Okay. So we've kind of gone way out of we've gone out of alignment. And I think I use that with hesitancy as well, because I don't like to use out of alignment, negative, bad, good. It's just maybe, in fact, that was where the person needed to go. They needed to go off the radar.
That's true.
And then quantumly, the quantum web of intelligence is like, and brings them right.
I really like how you said that, Mary, because that is a true statement. Sometimes we do have to take a detour, right? And maybe it is not necessarily that we're out of balance or out of alignment, but we had to kind of go that way so we can regroup to get back to center again. So that's actually a very good way to put it. So Athena's asking, humans can develop multiple personalities, but what about higher consciousness having it? Or something very similar? I think that's actually a phenomenal question.
Yeah, this is an interesting question. I feel like there's so many ways that I can answer this, but I know that there's some people that, and this is what I know Debbie has shared and we've talked about, where there are souls that incarnate and they're part of like a group mind, a group collective, and they have a collective mission. When it comes to, so that's kind of how I would relate to that, because like with multiple personality, I see that more as an individual like experiencing a fracture, a split. And I've shared of this on my social, but like where I have seen in the quantum, or the representation of fractured, splitting, multiple personality, kind of the list of that territory is a mirror that's been fractured. And in each of the fractures is a different aspect of the individual that basically has shattered. And usually the shatter that takes place is from a traumatic incident. It's from, I see this a lot with like narcissistic abuse, domestic violence, things like that, where it's too much for, especially if somebody's 9 years or younger or 13 years or younger, it's too much for them to process or take in. So there's an immediate splitting. So I don't know if that answers the.
Do we have, as we kind of take on this multiple personality, or, whatever, the mind screw, right? Do we have like walk-ins coming in and out of us, like our different parts of us? Is that, because there's been this theory about that. There's a walk-in that will replace the existing soul or spirit of sorts. And if you can help us make sure I'm saying that correctly. But is it kind of like that? Like, all right, tag, you're out, I'm in, kind of thing like that, and they just come in when needed, maybe different. And is that maybe sometimes why people like, maybe
that could be why people feel a little schizophrenic too.
People feel that it's like, or people on the other side that are dealing with you, family, whatever, are they like thinking maybe like, oh, it's a different, you seem a little off, or you seem a little different. Is that phenomenon happening at all?
It's interesting because walk-ins is a topic that I've also heard about, and I've heard, friends of mine share about that as well. The way that my perspective, that may not be directly under the wing of walk-ins, because I haven't really had the experience of that. But I think that when people go through, and again, it's like when these energies that are coming in are shocking people's nervous systems. And when they're shocking people's nervous systems, they can get so ungrounded and out of their body, especially if, let's say, they already were somebody who struggled with dissociation, anxiety, depression. They're kind of not in their body. So they're kind of drifting into these, let's say with depression, drifting into these kind of lower states of consciousness that do allow for thought forms to come in and kind of like take over the consciousness of the individual. And because of them being so disconnected from their pillar of light, they can drift. They can kind of start to drift, and then it can be difficult to find their way back almost. And the way that, and this happens a lot with like plant medicine as well. I know people who they have the best of intentions. Maybe they're like working a corporate job for 20 years and they're super unhappy. They're like, last resort, I'm going to go to Costa Rica and I'm going to do ayahuasca for 10 days when they've never done anything before that. And they completely shock their system. They go out into these higher dimensional spaces. They see a bunch of stuff and it's really shocking. So the lower parts of their self, the ego, the intellect, can have like, there's just this huge distance between the two, and it can be a challenge for the individual to bring themselves back into wholeness and really be able to process like what just happened. And in fact, this happens a lot too with sessions where people will come in. It will be very apparent that their soul is unaware of why, not their soul, their human self is unaware of why they're there. Similarly to like a business corporate individual deciding to go to Costa Rica for the first time ever, wanting to just access God. And they're like, I just want the quick fix now so I can just get better. It's kind of like they have that experience, and then they have the main message becomes, oh my gosh, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. And then it's a matter of reintegrating and basically walking themselves back in. So that's kind of how I have seen things sort of related to that topic, but in a different way.
Yeah.
You know why I love your series, Mary? Because you talk about the quantum library from a very practical point of view. So it's not like heavy or, you know, scientific. It's your experiences, your practical, from your practical applications that you've had, not only with yourself, but your clients as well. And it breaks it down into a very easy way to understand really what is going on and what is this all about. So the 0 point energy, we're hearing a lot about this 0 point energy. Can you help us kind of understand like what exactly is it? And is that part of the quantum library as well?
Yeah. So if we, even just take a second to close our eyes, obviously when our eyes are closed, we're looking into a voidal space. We're looking into what you could say is that space. However, if we're in a specific brainwave state and we're closing our eyes, we're going to be matching the frequency of the brainwave state that we're in, which is why a lot of people really don't like meditation. They're just like, they sit down and they're like, I cannot stand meditation, because they're, like they're living stressful, busy lives, and they've got a practitioner or a doctor or a therapist saying, hey, maybe try meditating to slow things down, calm things down, whatever. And they may be in the beta brainwave state more often than not, which is the survival brain. And that's really where the black and white thinking gets exacerbated. That's where the thought looping, that's where people get really caught in the thought loops because they keep going back and forth between the black and the white and the black and the white, and they're not able to have a higher, more creative, holistic view or lens of things. So
I just want to be clear with that. So when people are in beta or high beta, that's when they're like in panic mode, freak out mode. Their mind is just racing and they can't control it.
Yes. So like a lot of people, I think,
Uh-oh.
and this has to do too with the nervous system too, because again, we're not doing the exercises. So beta, it's usually like around 12 to 40 hertz. So it's stress, it's fight or flight, it's survival. So when we get into theta or alpha brainwave states, that's where we slow. It's like, and when we slow it down, we get out of that kind of, I guess you could say like the rat race, like spinning like this.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're able to actually receive information from those frequency levels that actually come in at a very fast pace. So for instance, when somebody comes in for a session, sometimes they walk in the door. And again, I go into way more detail about this on the series. But when people come in, I'll get the impression of everything that has to be said over the 57 minutes. So if you think about that, it's like, what the heck, like, how does that make sense? And but I'm saying this because when people come in, I do my own prayer, I do my own shielding, I have a whole process, and it's really it's pretty simple. It's just a matter of getting into a meditative state and shifting into a different brainwave. So then when they come in, I get the first imprint, and it's a matter of basically reverse engineering all of the data that's received. And so I actually don't love to use the word channeling because I prefer to use like channeling, channeled transmissions. Like everything that comes in and through is received by my higher self and translated through my human self. Because when I'm connecting with that higher aspect of myself, it sees, hears, and feels things from a level that's completely different than like my human self. So I'm really it's a matter of having and intention is so important too, guys. Like when people want to connect with the quantum, when they want to, close their eyes, get into a deep meditation and say, personal records show me what I need to see for my soul evolution, like show me what I need to see for my highest good today. It could be really simple daily practices, almost like how people like to pull daily cards or whatever. It can be like something that you can start to do in that way.
That's really good.
Yeah. And I think, so my point is, that's where also people, they're in meditation or they're dropping in and they start to receive a bunch of stuff. But if their mental volume is turned up too loud, so if they need to meditate for 15 minutes longer, or maybe they need to practice for a few more weeks to get more grounded, maybe they need to set those few boundaries, maybe they need to cut out caffeine for a second. The nicotine, there's all the vaping going on right now that jacks people's nervous system up like crazy. And I'm like, whatever people want to do whatever you want to do. I'm only saying this from, if you want to kind of get into these areas and access this stuff, nicotine, caffeine, sugar, parasites in the body, all that stuff definitely affects somebody's ability to access that
Higher.
And it also misinterpret what they're actually receiving too, right? In addition to accessing it.
And alcohol, certainly.
Yeah, alcohol is I mean, I personally haven't drank since 2014, and I love to share about that because it's like I don't have any judgment against it, but the energy of alcohol is called spirits for a reason, you know. So when people invite that energy in, I'm sure all of us have had an experience, you know, with somebody or whatever, relative or personally, who knows, where you can watch the person go from who they are to that other being. They become someone completely different.
The Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde syndrome.
Yes. What was it that you just said though? Because I kind of just went off on a little. You asked me a question.
No, so it's more of a comment in it that, like, you know, when people are there and if they're, you know, they're misinterpreting maybe what the messages are too,
Because
and they think they're getting like, oh, I'm getting these amazing downloads, but
yes,
you know,
where's it really coming from?
Where's it really coming from?
Is ultimately.
Yeah, this is really key. This is kind of specific, but I'll relate it to this. I've noticed with individuals, so when you get into different brainwave states, you can get into very specific modes of focus. Like when you get into the flow state, you know, that's where they talk about artists, musicians, whatever. When they get into that flow state, they just start to like channel this material, whatever they're doing. When it comes to, and sometimes when you're in those states, those focused states, you're going into more granular fields of information. You're going into more granular sectors of consciousness, and your mind, your focal point, your inner eye is going like this. It's magnifying information and taking somebody deeper into it. It's very much like going deep into a mushroom trip. It's kind of similar, but sober. And with other things being dumped into the system, you know, for instance, like parasites, it's like those things, they are driving people's consciousness. So if someone's riddled with parasites in their intestines or their in other organs, it will literally start to corrode the body, which the body will then start to have specific thoughts because of what is eating away at it.
That makes perfect sense.
Yes, and it doesn't feel good for the soul. And then when it comes to other substances, like I have a really dear friend who, Ryan Sprague, he does, you know, conscious cannabis work. So he helps people connect consciously with the plant of cannabis and eliminate an addictive relationship with it. And then there's other people who are more about having a completely clear state, and removing themselves from that, because it's different for each person. But yes, when we have substances coming in, it will, you know, temporarily magnify, it will temporarily distort our lens. And that's why people get addicted, because, you know, let's say they're in their lived reality sober and they're really unhappy because they've got a lot of undealt with trauma, shadow work. And the other thing too is with depression and anxiety, I don't want to ever downplay those things because I know how severe it can be for some people. I know that people can be locked in their bed for months at a time, and someone could say, you know, just get out of bed, you know, just go for a run. But it's really not that easy for people.
Amazing.
Like
Debilitating.
it's just debilitating. And I think that's why too, if people need medications, I'm like, again, whatever people need to do to really get themselves up and going each day, to start doing the things that they can do to take care of themselves, that's important. But it's like funny because we're kind of going all into all the territories, like mental health, and then there's like substances stuff, but it really is such a spectrum and so different for everybody. And I think that's why too, with all this kind of space, I never like to be one size fits all. This is the thing, and this is what the answer is. It's like, I'm more like,
what did you do before you started tapping into, like, what was your occupation before you were Mary Buckingham, the quantum library expert?
Yeah, I actually, this goes before working, but I was an athlete for like my whole life. Like I played volleyball, I played Division I volleyball. So I started when I was really, really young. And then I got my bachelor's at Berkeley. I got my master's at USC. I worked in I worked primarily in marketing for different fields. So real estate, medical, a place that did like luggage stuff. I worked at a marketing agency. So I was always more drawn to the creative aspects of life and speaking to people. But I really I'll say this too, going back to a really young age, I definitely fit more into the category of like an indigo child. So I had a pretty early, you know, you could say like renaissance of art and creating art, making art, and writing, like 9 years and younger. And then right at 9 years old is when I started sports. So that kind of took over. And so now I actually feel in the last several years of doing this stuff, it's like reclaiming my indigo child. That part of me that was like very much, and I think too now, because that was many years ago. So like, I think now the way people are supporting children is there's a little more information on like, you know, this being is very sensitive and she's tuned into interesting things. Like I had imaginary friends when I was like 4 or 5.
Right.
So I think so, but then you kind of start to, you know, I get into sports, I'm in school, and you start to notice, okay, other people aren't really noticing or like thinking about things like this. So I just started to kind of try to be normal. And that ultimately created suffering.
Shuts it down. Yeah, it shuts it all down.
So we wanted to bring you on here today and you know, just to introduce the series, obviously, but you're just so easy to work with. And I think the concept of people, which I really recommend everybody just connects with you, because they're just to understand what it's like, because people are always trying to find a way, or they're looking for someone else to provide them the answers. You know what I mean? Yeah. And then this is like, you know, the whole concept of a quantum library, Akashic records, however you want to frame it. You know, it's a pretty powerful thing if you can wrap your head around it, and you've done it really well. The series has just been a privilege to get to do that with you. So thanks for that.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, for sure. And then, so so we got your information scrolling right there where they can get it. Where else would you like people to reach out to you, Mary? Like just if they want to connect with you to get a session or to learn more about your works, what's the best way?
Yeah, if you guys just go to my website, it's the same as my name that's floating here, marybuckingham.com. You can find, you know, sessions. I also have a program. I have a community group. So that's where you can dive into all of these things. And what I like to say too, with working with me in sessions and stuff is, even if you know, just get the series or you kind of watch other things that I've done and maybe we don't interact, you're still connecting with a frequency and an energy, and you're still going to, you know, your soul is going to hear stuff that's beyond your mind, and that creates activation. And that's probably one of the things I'm hearing most with the people, the feedback after sessions. It's like, yes, the information is wonderful to receive. And there's other modalities I use as well. Energy work, like breath work and stuff like that. But there's a way deeper and bigger process occurring. If you think about how dolphins communicate through sonar waves, it's
Mhm.
kind of like that, where even if it's just
Yeah, I get it.
waves hitting, there's an activation that takes place, and it's like wherever God, source, universe takes you. I've seen like miracles happen. I could probably do an episode on that.
Would you?
Fabulous.
Let's
That would
do
be
it.
fantastic.
Would love
Yeah.
for you to do an episode on that. Miracles is always a good
I
thing
could
to do an
definitely
episode on.
attest to being in your frequency.
Yeah.
It makes you
Aw,
feel
thank you.
really wonderful. It
Well, you
raises
know,
your
all
vibration.
we
It
ha-
makes me feel calm.
Yeah,
Thank
Yeah, it's
you.
really an honor.
it's
I'm getting emotional again, you guys.
this is the best. It worked. Told you it would work. Good job.
It's so true. And
So,
anybody that's watching this is
Mary is a
agreeing.
star, everybody, for real.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that because you're here with us, but
No.
again, all we have is each other to help us through our journey in life, and someone that can help guide us through this stuff. And look, we need each other. That's the bottom line. There's nobody that's the end all. If you think so, then maybe you don't belong on this planet anyway. So I would say I would definitely say reach out to Mary. Mary, I look forward to much more doing work with you. I hope everybody else does too. Information in the description. Enjoy this series, everybody. It's phenomenal. And thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Love you all.
Much love. And together with Mary's help, we are turning the universal key to global harmony and creating a unified world. Thank you so much for tuning in. And remember, tune in often, tell all your friends, and most importantly, may all your dreams come true. Many blessings.